My name is Jeff Morgan. I'm from Dallas, Texas, and I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. This is the little hat that my youngest grandson, well, he was my youngest grandson at the time, Gideon Morgan, used to wear. And I've kept this with me for 6 years. This is my memory of Gideon. And I also have a couple of things right here. I've got a few diapers still that, because both Cruz and Gideon used to spend so much time at our house. And I have these these diapers. I believe 2 are for Gideon and 2 are for Cruz, my older grandson. And I've kept on to these. These are my memories of Cruz and Gideon. So at the beginning of December, I had a dentist appointment out in Rockwall, Texas. I drove by my old house, and as I drove by, I saw a car there that looked like, well, that's not a car that should be there. And I was wondering whether somebody was visiting from out of state, possibly my daughter. My daughter had moved to Washington State with her husband and with the 3 grandchildren. Of course, they would not tell me anything about this move. And when I drove back, my daughter came out of the house with the grandchildren. I think all of the grandchildren were in the car, and she was putting my youngest grandson, his name is Ranger, I've never yet met Ranger, putting Ranger into the car seat. So I wanted to stop, I wanted to get out, I wanted to tell my daughter how much I loved her. I wanted to see the grandkids and tell them how much your grandfather misses you, he loves you so much. And I was afraid though, because of what happened in 2015, there was a CPS report filed against my daughter, and somehow I got blamed for filing it. My daughter at that point then chose to sue me, took me to court, tried to get a protective order against me, and tried to get me convicted of a felony. The felony charges were immediately reduced to a misdemeanor once the Detective Officer Quezada, who was looking for a little notch on his belt, I'm sure, immediately threw it into misdemeanor traffic court, where I had to appear, and the whole case was dismissed. But in addition to that, I had to go through a hearing because my daughter was trying to put a protective order upon me. And the judge heard the case. The judge was ready to write an opinion a couple of times against me. When you're in these situations, everybody gets to make the accusations. You don't even get to respond. And it wasn't, we had 10 minutes left on our side, and my wife got up there and testified on my behalf. And then the judge, after realizing that there was a whole nother side to this whole story here, let me testify for a few minutes as well. So this went on into a second day, and at the end of the trial, the judge found me completely innocent. There was no evidence of anything that my daughter had alleged. I was shocked because my ex-wife had gotten up there. My ex-wife was a strong Christian lady, so I thought, felt free to commit perjury. Anyway, so my daughter kicked me out of my grandchildren's lives. Prior to this time, I was babysitting them very, very much, sometimes up to 5 times a week, and that's why I had the diapers, because we had diapers here, we had all sorts of things. The grandkids used to stay with us all the time, and if they didn't stay here, I would go over and I would babysit them there. And this was actually when I was working out of town, so I'd come home from the weekend, and one of the first things I'd do was want to know when I can babysit. And I was the default babysitter for most of 8 months. And I was the person that my daughter wrote to me and said, "Dad, I hope you are always close to Cruz and Gideon because you're good for them. And if you're always close to them, I know they're going to turn out okay." And then this thing happened with CPS. I got the false accusation against me, and she kicked me out of their lives and said that she was going to erase my memory from their lives. And it's been because of this whole thing that has happened that I've been involved in some of these issues pertaining to fixing and restoring our family courts so that there's some type of justice, and to exposing the works of evil and darkness that take place with CPS and these family court judges and these attorneys that look to profit off of the destruction of families, and also to try to say that we should have some type of penalties in family court or in district court, whatever court you want to call it, when perjury is committed. Perjury is rampant in these courts, and even though these judges say, "Well, we'll never take perjury in our court," they permit it, and they very seldom, if ever, do anything about it. District attorneys don't want to do it. I've heard some people say, "Well, do you want us to go after perjury, or do you want us to go after these big rapists that are raping kids?" As if you can't do both. They take the worst possible scenario, and they basically say that perjury is okay. For myself, I have lost all trust in the judiciary, but that's straying from the point here. Anyway, Stephanie went to a church called Shoreline City Church. I contacted the church. I asked the church to get involved. And at the beginning, I thought there was going to be maybe some help coming from the church. When I went inside the church seemed very loving and warm. I left a message with somebody to give it to the pastor, Pastor Earl McClellan. Somebody called me back, and I told him what had happened, and he was very sympathetic. A few days later on, there was another person on the phone with him. His name is Jordan Murillo. He was a director of security or something for the church, and he took the position that the policy of Shoreline City Church is that they needed to protect my daughter from me. I was shocked to hear this. I asked him if he would read the transcript, if I sent him the transcript of the trial. He looked at the transcript and he wrote back and said, Stephanie has not been telling us the entire truth. And she had not been telling them the entire truth. Anyway, again, I asked the church to help restore the relationship between me and my daughter. That's just the background here about what happened with seeing my daughter out there and wanting to go up to her, wanting to hug her, wanting to tell her how much I loved her, and wanting to see my grandchildren just say, I love you guys so much, I've missed you so much. This was a letter that I wrote to some people because I saw my daughter and I said, how do I do this? How do I get reconciled with her? Knowing that if I even stopped by and said, I love you, Stephanie, I miss you, how are you doing? I hope everything's fine, that I could have a police report filed against me, that I could be imprisoned for this, that I could have more charges brought up against me. So December the 1st, 2020, I wrote this to some friends. We'll talk about the response from Shoreline City Church in just a few moments, but I did ask them to write to Shoreline City Church. And if you look online at their website right now, they have an initiative. They want to bring heaven to earth. They want to raise $800,000 by December the 31st, 2020, so that they can help bring heaven to earth. And yet when it comes down to helping families restore relationships, they do almost nothing. And that is the hypocrisy of the church. Anybody who's been through some of these things knows what I'm speaking of. In many instances, the church is a complete and miserable failure when it comes down to family situations. Families that are going through divorce, they should be telling the people, stop the divorce. We will not let you get divorced. You must seek counseling. You must reconcile. Situations where the prodigal runs away, the church takes the side of the prodigal and goes after the father or the mother in many instances. And then they try to say, well, obviously the parents were abusive. Anyway, this is the letter that I wrote to a few friends. I wrote to a number of friends, and just because I know that not everybody's going to respond, but I just said, hey, I'm pouring out my heart to them. December the 1st, 2020. I usually don't do this, but I'd like to ask for your help if you can do so. As many of you know, I haven't seen my grandchildren for over 5.5 years. I used to babysit them up to 5 times a week, and then I got blamed for filing a report with Children's Protective Services, CPS. CPS knew I was innocent, but they would not convey that information to my daughter, Stephanie. As a result, my daughter disowned me and told me that she would erase the memory of me from my grandchildren. She then tried to get a protective order against me, and she filed a false police report against me and tried to get me charged with a felony. In spite of perjury by her and my ex-wife, the judge found me innocent of all charges and refused to put any protective order on me, and all criminal charges were dismissed in the criminal charge or the criminal case. And if you're a man in Texas, you know that if somebody files a protective order against you or a restraining order against you, you are at a disadvantage from the get-go. Judges more than likely will go with whatever is being said because they do not want to be responsible. What happens if this man really is violent? And what happens if he goes back and he does something? And they're going to say, well, he was in this judge's court and the judge didn't do anything. The judge is predisposed to putting the protective order upon a person who is charged with some type of a crime. Oftentimes the evidence that is needed to get a protective order or a restraining order against him is next to nothing. And we know this from what Assistant District Attorney Leslie Levy counseled in Williamson County Court, a video that she had taken down from YouTube because it was exposing her as being the fraud that she was. Anyway, perhaps the most tragic and confusing of all of this was that it was because Karen, and Karen is my wife, and I were helping her, that I got blamed for all of this stuff. She needed help. And of all the people in the family, now Stephanie had her mother here and her mother's new husband, John Wygant. She had her sister here. She had her brother here. And of all of these people around, who did she call? She called me. And she asked me to have my wife Karen help out. Of all the people in the family, she called me when I was out of state. I was working in Arkansas. I called Karen and she dropped everything and responded and helped my daughter until I got back a few days later. Had we been unable to help or too busy to help, perhaps none of this would have happened. I don't know. Our intervention caused CPS to stop the investigation of my daughter. They were relieved to know that my grandchildren had a strong safety net with us in their lives, but they refused to tell her that I was not the person who reported her, even after I begged them to do so. And I did contact caseworker Penny Hutchinson and told her what was going on. Penny said, well, there was a policy against this. There was no policy. Penny Hutchinson invoked a policy that didn't exist. I talked with her supervisor, Mia, and Mia also confirmed that the policy didn't exist. And then I talked with somebody else out in Rockwall, and of course there's no policy. But everybody wants to say, well, we've got to take the kids out. The kids were okay. But what they were doing is they took a report, an anonymous report from a hospital that got thrust upon me, and I had to defend myself against this charge because CPS would not tell my daughter the truth, that I had absolutely nothing to do with it. And furthermore, because of this, I went through a lawsuit, and my daughter and my ex-wife got up there, committed perjury. They were trying to ruin my life. They were trying to get me fired from my job. They wanted to destroy my marriage. They wanted to see me imprisoned. I contacted Penny Hutchinson afterwards, and Penny Hutchinson went, oh, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Well, Penny Hutchinson, the CPS worker who was involved, she was directly responsible for a lot of this stuff happening. I'm not blaming her for everything that my ex-wife did and that my daughter did and that her ex-boyfriend did, but I will tell you that she got the ball rolling by not taking the time to tell my daughter that it had absolutely nothing to do with this. And this is a CPS worker, Penny Hutchinson. Their refusal to do so led my daughter, ex-wife, and her family to cause a lot of problems. They literally tried to destroy my life, my marriage, my career, and my relationship with my grandchildren. And when I say my ex-wife and her family, I'm talking about my ex-wife's mother and my ex-wife's father. Yvonne Celeste Streifling Lee, a missionary, and Reverend, or I should say fake Reverend, I don't think he's a Reverend, but he held those credentials, supposedly, Richard Charles Lee, both out of Washington State, and they were so-called missionaries in Mexico. But they actually tried to destroy my marriage. My former mother-in-law, who used to be a truth teller, committed all sorts of slanders and wrote all sorts of lies, but that is, I guess, it revealed who she was deep at heart. They literally tried to destroy my life, my marriage, my career, and my relationship with my grandchildren. They were successful in the latter. After these events, my daughter attended Shoreline City Church. When I found out, I contacted a few people in leadership from the church to try to get them to help restore things. Instead, and again, this was led by Jordan Murillo, instead they took the view that they needed to protect Stephanie from me. I was shocked. After I provided them the transcript of the trial, one person told me that Stephanie wasn't telling them the entire truth. No kidding. But in the end, their default position was that she needed space, and they had a policy and a duty to protect her. They wanted her to thrive in her community. And in fact, one of the pastors told me that there's no need to worry about the grandchildren, that we're her family, they're doing just fine. So here was a church, and the pastor at the time was Pastor Judy Brown. She was a female pastor of that church, and I did not know at the time that she had a daughter that had died, a special needs daughter. People know I have a special needs stepson, and she had a special needs daughter that died. I was unaware of that, but this is what she told me, is that they were the new family and that everything was fine, and don't worry about my daughter and my grandchildren. How arrogant and how insensitive on her part. I had hoped that the church would help, but in the end, they were not helpful at all. And this was a process that took place over 3 years, and I have been blackballed in a sense, and there have been a lot of things said. I've tried to contact them probably maybe 8 to 12 times via email, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, I'm not sure. Also via their website, probably more than a dozen times actually. And they don't like to hear that they could actually be wrong in this position. Anyway, yesterday I was in Rockwall for a dentist appointment. I drove by my old house. As I did so, I saw that my daughter and grandchildren were there. They may have been and maybe still are living in a different state. I didn't know what to do, so I drove past them and tried to get a glimpse of my grandchildren in the mirror. I wanted to get out and hold them, but I couldn't. I was afraid, didn't know what to do, because I know that my daughter could file a police report against me, and the Rockwall police, of course, would come down there and try to arrest me, as they have in the past. So now that Stephanie is in town, I was hoping that maybe somebody would write, text, or call the people from the church and perhaps say a few words on my behalf. Let them know that they completely mischaracterized me and tell them to act like Christians and to try to help fix things. You see, the church has a responsibility. If there are people within the church that are feuding, they're supposed to try to restore things. That is plain teaching of the Bible. And if you have a daughter and a father, or a son and a father, or if you have even situations between a husband and a wife, the church is supposed to be there and supposed to tell them, act like Christians. You need to restore this. Husband and wife, you are a symbol of the relationship between Christ and the church. Parents and children, this is the last thing that God talked about in the Old Testament, how he would be turning the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children to the father, lest he come and strike the land with a curse. And right now, when the church is not doing that, the church is participating and helping that curse being fulfilled upon our land. And Shoreline City Church, in my opinion, is guilty of doing just that. They are not a helpful participant, and that is what it is. I don't know how much time Stephanie and my grandchildren are in town, but if any of you or others that you know would be willing to help in this way, I'd be grateful. The church is Shoreline City Church, and I put down the Facebook page, and I also put down the phone number. The person in charge of security, and the person I've spoken to the most, is Jordan Murillo. I gave his Facebook profile, I gave his phone number, I gave his email at shorelinedallas.com, and also his personal email. The pastor is Earl McClellan, and I provided his phone number. Now, Pastor Earl McClellan and I actually spoke in person. So Pastor Earl McClellan, even though he's tried to delegate things off and shove things off to Jordan, because Jordan has told me that Earl has delegated things to me and this whole thing. Pastor Earl McClellan and I have spoken face to face. I went down there with Matthew in a wheelchair, with Matthew's service dog, Retta, at the time, and also with a nurse. And we spoke face to face. And yeah, he said he didn't know a whole lot about it. He heard something about it. Pastor Earl McClellan could have done something. Pastor Earl McClellan has delegated this, and Jordan Murillo, even though he's tried to do some things, in the end he has really failed in his responsibility. And the church is upset with me. I have been threatened that if I go down to the church that I would be arrested by the Dallas Police Department. This is what the church has done. This church that is trying to bring heaven to earth with an $800,000 offering by December the 31st, 2020. I would like this church, Shoreline City Church, to start to bring heaven to earth by actually going back to their mission and helping to reunite and restore families. That is one of the primary missions of the church. The primary mission of the church is to reconcile man with God. And when it comes down to family, the church should be involved with this. This should be a matter of utmost importance at the church, not something that we can say, we're going to bring heaven to earth by raising money and by giving gifts. No, you bring heaven to earth by restoring families. Strong families are the foundation of society. Strong families are the foundation of a strong church. And when you permit family destruction, or when you encourage it, or when you refuse to address it, you are part of the problem. You are not part of the cure. To finish this email, I said, if you write, text, or call, I hope you will speak well of me and of my love for my kid and grandkids, and encourage them to be the church and do the right thing and try to help fix the relationship. Obviously, there's a lot of emotion involved in this for me. And the emotion was that I thought, maybe I can see my grandchildren at the Christmas. Maybe this Christmas. Maybe they're back there. I don't know. But maybe I can see my grandchildren and tell Cruz and Gideon, just hug them, how much I love them, how much I miss them. And just say, I've had to do a few things, but I've missed you. I've loved you every single day. And maybe get to meet my other grandson, Ranger. I just keep thinking and hoping that maybe I'll be able to see them again. For those who contact them, thank you so much, Jeff. So yesterday when one of Matt's nurses came in, because I had sent him the text as well, because he knows what's been going on. All the nurses have seen what's going on here. The nurses were down there to testify on my behalf at the trial. From what they had seen, and they had seen everything, and they saw how much I love the grandkids, and none of these things that I was alleged to have done were anywhere close to truth. But one of my nurses said to me yesterday, yes, said I called them, and I believe he had a friend call him as well. And he called up and they said hello, they answered the phone, and he said, I'm here to speak on behalf of Jeff. Click, they hang up. So this is the response of the church. The response of the church is when say, I want to talk to you on behalf of Jeff Morgan, click, hang up. How many people does the church actually fail I've talked with many people, and they've told me the church is one of the worst places to get help. Actually, it was Rachel Denhollander who was talking about, she was an evangelical, she loved the church, but if you are looking for help, and if you go to the evangelical church often does not help. The evangelical church abuses, and leadership often abuses. During this course of Christmas time, I would like to encourage Shoreline City Church. You can contact me, talk with Jordan Murillo. He's got my contact information. In fact, the elder board should have my contact information. I've written to them. I would be glad to talk with them. I would be glad to take somebody with me, because the last time I was down there, once again, they had 3-on-1 situation, and all I can say is that they bring out people that really don't know what they're talking about, and then they try to put you in a situation where you can do something that they can, like, oh, he was violent, he was this, he was that. The goon squad is what I would call them, came out after me last time. And I would love to see my grandson Gideon and my grandson Cruz. And if possible, I would love to meet my other grandson Ranger. And I would like my daughter Stephanie to know that, whatever she's done in the past, there is forgiveness out there. She can create restoration. And even my ex-wife, with her perjury, I would love for her to say, I'm sorry, I committed perjury against you. And again, she would be forgiven. We had even thought a year or two ago about having her and her new husband out to our house at Christmas time, just to say, fix the stuff. We're willing to do whatever, because children need both parents in their lives, and grandchildren need their grandparents. My ex-wife actually tried to get my daughter to put my oldest grandson up for adoption, and I was the one that's saying, Stephanie, think this through. Don't do this. I'll do whatever I can to help you. Just most recently at my son's wedding, afterwards at the reception, I was threatened by my ex-wife's new husband and also by her father. I did file a police report against them just for informational purposes, not to press charges. The police wanted me to file a criminal assault charge against my former father-in-law. I refused to do so because he is my children's grandfather, but that actually did take place. Christmas time, there are a lot of emotions for me. It's the deepest desire of my heart to see my grandchildren. As far as I'm concerned, there's no ill will, but it would be nice if they would just tell the truth. As far as Shoreline City Church is concerned, Shoreline City Church has been a miserable failure in this, and Shoreline City Church should be able to acknowledge it. Take the first steps to say, listen, we are hypocrites right now. We think that we can bring heaven to earth by raising money, and yet we are not bringing heaven to earth by helping to reconcile families. Something is wrong with us. We need to think this through again. I would be very willing to talk with them. And again, I would have to have a witness because of the goon squads that have come after me in the past. I'd love to have the opportunity, though. And, so I do hope that at Christmas time that this is a wonderful time for many families, for parents who can't see their children because there is a malicious and vicious either ex-wife or ex-husband who's keeping the children from a person. My heart goes out to you. To grandparents who can't see their grandchildren because of the same thing, or because of the idea of grandparent alienation. Again, my heart goes out to you too. In Texas, we're still fighting these things. We have a lot of good things coming up this upcoming legislation session. We do believe that the state of Texas has been very abusive in their laws toward the parent-child relationship. We do want to get things changed. So the default position is that children can have relationships with both parents, and from my position, so that families can be strengthened and so that we can reduce and minimize and perhaps even eliminate needless divorce in the state of Texas. Thank you very much.